Welcome to the Biometric Update podcast. I'm your host, Joel McConvey. Or am I? Remember when you saw your first AI deepfake? It probably had 6 fingers, or an arm coming from nowhere, or some other visible anomaly that gave it away as a product of generative AI. That era, which arguably began with the introduction of generative adversarial networks in 2014, is over. By 2024, the World Economic Forum had identified deepfakes as one of the top global risks. By 2025, the UK government was declaring deepfakes to be the greatest challenge of the online age. In 2026, synthetic media is commonplace. Yet, while would-be AI creators have found moderate success with audiences who seem to prefer human expression, the market for AI-assisted fraud has exploded, with tiered fraud-as-a-service packages offered like mobile subscription plans. Fake job candidates have become a major problem. Synthetic identities that combine real data with deepfake images outmatch the capabilities of legacy authentication systems. Injection attacks bypass cameras to insert deepfakes directly into media streams. What does all of this mean? It means online trust can no longer be taken for granted. Deepfake detection is now an essential part of the biometric security stack, and increasingly, a necessary tool to navigate an online universe populated with fake people. On today's episode, you'll hear from a couple of providers that are working to meet the deepfake threat head-on and get a peek into Biometric Update's latest report, the Deepfake Fraud Detection Market 2026, Securing Identity in the AI Era. So buckle up and scan your face to begin. Jesus Aragon is the CEO of biometric identity verification provider Identy. Recently, I spoke with him about the scale of the current fraud landscape and what deepfake detection firms are up against. He describes the shift from physical to digital warfare, from Tom Cruise Mission Impossible mask attacks to an expanding ecosystem of fraud-enhancing technology.
When we talk about identity, we talk about biometrics, the first thing that comes to mind is a presentation attack detection, right? If you're capturing faces or fingerprints or palms or irises, the first question is, how can I break it, right? So if I just photocopy your face or put up your face on the TV screen and I try to see if your software will pick that as a real person, this is the past, right? Let's assume that it's a solved problem. What is happening right now is that those attacks don't scale very easily, because if I have to buy an expensive mask that is $600 worth, and I'm going to commit like $1,000 or $2,000 fraud, then it's maybe not worth it. What is worth it for a fraudster is that I can create 10, 20 synthetic identities per day, and those attacks scale very rapidly, right? So what we see is that in the dark web, you can buy tools for $12 that are able to swap your face by like you insert a video feed and then you just swap the face for someone else, and with the same tool do an injection attack, right? And this is all for $12. So those attacks scale very rapidly. I'm talking about virtual cameras, emulators, app cloning, memory hooks. But even now, we see attacks happening on real devices like device farms. So the software is not able to identify, there is an attack because it's running on a real device. It is an attack, but it's not an emulator. It's not a virtual camera attack. It's just running on a real device. So that is really hard to identify. And this is what is happening right now, right? That we evolved from PAD to virtual cameras, from virtual cameras to emulators, app cloning, memory hooks, and now we're talking about device farm injections, right? And obviously, when you do an injection, what you're injecting is a deepfake. Is a deepfake, right? So when we look at this, you really need to build a multi-layer approach to fraud detection, right? From PAD to injection attack to deepfake detection to injection detection, and that has to live together, right? And there is no other way to identify an AI attack other than using AI, right? So we use AI to fight AI.
The Deepfake Fraud Detection Market 2026 forecasts that deepfake fraud attempts will exceed 334 million annually by 2028. Total deepfake detection checks will exceed 12.24 billion. The market is still fragmented, but it's growing and moving slowly toward the establishment of standards and benchmarks. The key problem is pace. Think back to that question about your first encounter with a six-fingered AI celebrity or so-called AI slop like AI-generated Shrimp Jesus. And you can look that one up. It probably wasn't that long ago. But fraud never sleeps, and as new technologies emerge, the race is on to harness them for both attack and defense. So far, the most advanced AI to go mainstream is large language models, or LLMs. Algorithms like OpenAI's ChatGPT and Anthropic's Claude, both of which are also at the center of the shift to agentic models. These models can learn language, and based on what they know, predict what comes next in a string of text. Combined with deepfake media created using deep learning algorithms, they can create hyper-realistic digital content that fools the human eye. But they don't understand the way the real world actually works. Enter the world model. This week, California-based Resemble.ai debuted the Detect World AI model, which introduces a new approach to deepfake detection. It comes accompanied by Resemble's 2026 Deepfake Threat Report, which tracks deepfake incidents reported in the news between January 1st and June 30th, 2026. I spoke with Resemble's CEO, Zohaib Ahmed, about the company's big announcements, about the deepfake threat as it stands, and about what's next for deepfake detection. Resemble.ai's H1 2026 Deepfake Threat Report just came out, and it breaks down some numbers. Can you maybe tell us what you're seeing on the fraud front in terms of numbers from that report?
Totally. So the stats are super alarming. We collect a wide variety of incidents that are related to deepfakes pretty much on a daily basis at this point. So the report is from 821 verified attacks in the last 6 months. There are some alarming things in there. The first and foremost is 1 in 6 of the incidents relates to non-consensual sexual imagery. This has been like a widely discussed topic in the last 3 to 4 weeks, especially right now, and it's getting a lot more traction. But the other thing to think about is, what we thought as AI content that was largely political disinformation or being used for that purpose is now, voice attacks that are hitting hedge funds and phishing. You have image fraud that has increased significantly to 37.1%. And that's largely because the image models starting in January of this year have gotten so much better, right? Like they can now write. There's no more six fingers. They're exceptionally good at image editing and video editing. And we see that in receipt fraud, I think is the best example of this. So you have 70.8% of receipt fraud now is AI-generated receipts, which is up from 0% as of March 2025, which means that it is now the largest contributor of fraud for expense reporting. So you have entirely new categories that are showing up, and I think it was even hard to put together a report where the landscape is changing so quickly and so many other people are affected by deepfakes.
Yeah. It really is just spiking the number of different kinds of problems and issues we're seeing with this. There's a fascinating paragraph from the report that I want to read out loud. Fraudsters now ask for a job instead of money. Corporate fraud went almost completely dark in the press. The FBI counts billions in losses and regular fines 92% of businesses hit. Reporting completed fraud invites scrutiny and liability on top of the loss, so many enterprises may be putting in just as much effort to prevent PR scandals as they do deepfake prevention at scale. Sounds like we have a bit of a reactionary cycle here where businesses are almost chasing their own tail in terms of mitigating the damage. Can you speak to that? That's a fascinating observation.
Yeah, so I think what we have here is deepfakes are certainly a problem that almost all CISOs that we talk to across all enterprises are concerned about. but it's also a measurable amount of fraud. So they're very scared as to like, well, what we're scared of, like taking a peek under the covers and seeing how damaging this actually is. And like you said, extremely reactionary, largely because these candidates, like say for candidate frauds, these people are hired. They get through the entire process. And, you know, a lot of cybersecurity or like organizations and teams would a year ago say like, well, we have a lot of this covered because we have so many steps of the way. Like we have this like multi-layer approach to kind of preventing this stuff from happening. And the real damaging part here is like all of those layers are being broken to kind of still have candidates that go through, you know, resume screening, identity verification, employee onboarding, all the way to laptops being shipped to them. And then all of a sudden, like you sometimes months in, you realize, oops, I hired someone that I didn't think I was hiring. I hired like a completely fake individual, or more importantly, you hired a malicious individual. And it becomes less about like kind of like these ransomware attacks that I think a year ago were much more pointed. They were like, hey, we're going to drop a voicemail to the finance department and hope something. It's more of a typical phishing attempt. Now it's like, here's like an AI that can pretend for a longer period of time to hold up a story, to have like a complete multimodal representation of itself and kind of fool multiple layers of fraud detection that you have in place. So it's been that's been the single most interesting thing, I think, is let's just like CISOs kind of being reactionary to the entire thing and being astonished as to like how many layers of defense are these generative AI attacks kind of breaking through. Most cybersecurity, most antivirus software is an arms race. I think this has been true ever since basically we came out with computers. So and we hope effectively that like the detection of just like the detection of malware, et cetera, got better over time. The detection of like AI content and Gen AI gets better over time as well. But a very critical, important part of this is like keeping the detection module, or if you will, the model, if you will, up to date with kind of the kind of sophisticated architectural changes that are happening in the Gen AI world, right? So we had a largely transformer large language model approach, which made GPT what it is today, and all of the variants of GPT that have come out from different companies. And for a while, that was like how we approached the problem as well. And then we realized, like before that, what were people doing? People were trying to build like feature-based systems, like how far the distance between the eyes. Are there anomalies in the hand that we can see if we zoom in certain places, the length of the fingertips. And that's always been a very brittle approach to solve this problem. Cameras shake, they blur, you have skews that occur in imagery. These are all natural phenomenons that happen with natural, legitimate images. So you kind of took that feature-based approach, tried to make it a lot more generalized with transformers. And then I think what's exciting right now is there are a lot of companies in the world that are pushing this research in world models. And so you see this everything from autonomous vehicles to simulation software to robotics and physical AI. And the way that we thought about the world architecture was, this is a model that if you train it correctly can actually represent reality, right? It actually has a very, very concrete way of representing physics and reality. And therefore, we can get away from having this brittle feature-based model or training a model per generator to having something that's a lot more general purpose. So the question transforms from, which artifacts and features kind of indicate that this is fake to like, here's an image or video stream. Where does this break reality? That is a much more suitable approach for the models that are coming out today. I would say the images and the videos that come out today, you can't tell if they're fake or real. Like your human eyes cannot tell if they're fake or real. So the models that are detecting them also need to become a lot more sophisticated. And then we also are constantly thinking how to become more generalized, right? And so the world model allows us to build this version of reality, or it has a version of reality. And then when it sees input coming in, it compares the input to that representation and that it provides a very rich output, something that, and most benchmarks right now that we've put it against has beaten all of the other models that come against it for the task of detecting deepfakes.
So effectively, this is applying, real world physics to the way an AI understands its environment. Is that correct?
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Where is this taking us? Because obviously if this stuff is available to do good, I was reading a little bit about being used for climate models and environmental, work. But obviously any technology also presents the opportunity for misuse. So where's this all taking us? What are we going to see when world models become the next kind of baseline?
So I think from a generative perspective, world models are exciting because it's the first time we've had a completely new approach to intelligence and rather focusing on just language, right? And I think a lot of critics of large language models early on were, well, I don't think pattern matching language is exactly how the human brain works for intelligence, right? And we kind of all knew that. It's still shockingly surprising how good LLMs and VLMs became and how much language derived intelligence. I think it's incredible that the progress that we've made. And you can see that in some streams, like you have coding and you have writing, and where language is like the key part of intelligence that you're kind of tapping into your own brain as well when you do those tasks. So it's no surprise that those became so good with large language models. But I think somewhere we tried like reinforcement learning, and we've tried like more visual based models in the past, and world models, in my opinion, are the next sequence of that. It's now looking into another sense that humans have always had in terms of depth perception and how physics works in the real world. And we just like language, we don't think about it too much either. It's like the brain is wired in that way. But it's moving to a direction where I believe that world models are going to be the single way in which intelligence models are made in the future. Google has already kind of stepped in this arena. I think they illustrated with their latest release of their video model that it's what they keep calling in their material any to any model, right? Which they infer look, you could pass text in and it could throw text back out, or it could throw a video out, or it could make an image. You could give it a video and it knows how to interpret that as well. So it's like an any to any model rather than just being a language in and then some sort of output out model. The world model is interesting because I think it will consume LLMs to go do tasks. But they're really powerful because some of the things around like physical AI, robotics, like you meant climate, you could even create like simulations of firefighting, et cetera. If you can model the real world, you can help firefighters understand exactly the landscape and how they're going into a fire and what to expect. So you can run literally simulations of what could happen when you're going into an environment. And I think that's really exciting for a ton of use cases that it opens up. And it's almost like, we've gone from a model that just knows how to read and write and just understand language to now understanding like world phenomenons and physics, et cetera, which I think has, like I mentioned, a lot of implications. But for defense, it's also an interesting question because now you have a richer form of basically like attacks or attack vectors that could be exposed. I draw maybe a parallel to the internet, right? The internet, when it first really started coming out, you had rich text documents, RTF, rich text documents. And so a large amount of the internet was this rich text, right? And then you probably were aware of this. At one point, you had GIFs, and every website now had GIFs and blinking stuff. And then video became really popular. So you had video streaming services, and everything had to improve. Our network bandwidth had to improve. But we just had all of those carried the threat of other types of malware, right? So now instead of the text having malware or the bytes that are being downloaded to your browser, the image literally could have malware in it. The video could have malware in it. And so it just kind of gives every modality kind of gives its own mask of attacks being carried through it. And so with world models, the reason for us like really putting a lot of effort into this is we saw a ton of identity fraud, a ton of like real-time video fraud that was rising, and most people were not able to tell what's fake and what's real at this point. So it's kind of our response to like the latest evolution of intelligence models, and how do we actually use the same method to actually fight against that weapon.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It's so out there. It sounds so out there, and yet obviously this is happening right now. All these big companies are working on this stuff. Is this thing, if it knows how to understand language and it knows how to understand physics, what's stopping it from turning into a deadly robot that attacks us?
Yeah, you make a great point. So right now we're very much focused on like detection, right, and deepfakes, but I would say tackling deepfakes is a lot more than detection. Detection is like the first step. It's like the pill that you need now to kind of fight off all of the types of types of attacks, and that's where surfaces really matters, right? I think in your report you wrote something like, like does deepfake detection, is it a feature or is it like part of a grander thing? And I totally agree with you, right? And our approach at Resemble is we're trying to find different surfaces for this model to live in, right? So if it lives in your identity verification flow, if it lives inside of your contact center flow, if it lives inside of your telecommunications infrastructure, it probably lives inside of your phone at some point. But it's only as good as the surface it lives in, and that's the impact it has. And then there's like layers of other like infrastructure that needs to be made, and that currently is still very rudimentary, right? So this is again where watermarking comes in. This is where a lot of the work around guardrails have come in, and we're exploring guardrails from like a video, image, and audio perspective, largely because we see those modalities needing to have guardrails rather than just language. That's largely how we've interacted with LLM so far. But if we're shifting to multimodality, then we need to know like whether the video stream is breaking guardrails, or if that in itself the video stream is a prompt injection. So the guardrails are a part of it. And then the last layer that we think about is explainability. With much of security, even if you open and your Mac or your antivirus software says this is a malware, it will probably tell you a little bit more of like why it's a malware, like where it's reported, et cetera, who else has seen it. There's a lot more explainability behind every single type of cybersecurity attack than just like, this is bad. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is also explain the entire thing such that like the humans at the end of it can understand like why the AI model is making the prediction or adding that guardrail where it is, right? I think with AI, there's just, like you pointed out, there's so much uncertainty. We're trying to reverse engineer what we've created effectively, right? Like, if you take this intelligent thing and it gets autonomy and it gets like it self-recursively improves itself, and then it can figure out how to break these guardrails. So then we need to start thinking like, how do we tackle that with like updating the sandboxes and updating the actual guardrails itself with all of these different types of models that we're creating. So it is a deepfake detection is a part of the larger solution, but catching deepfakes, I think, involves a few more pieces than just the detection portion of it.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen the market move towards a more sort of holistic model. Do you think it's fair to say that a company that wants to come to the table now and offer defense has to do a lot more?
A company that wants to come to the table and offer defense. Are we talking about like cybersecurity companies?
Yeah, I mean, you're coming to you're saying we're going to detect deepfakes. We're offering you this service to this business, and that involves so much now. That's not just we're going to find this artifact in this image. There's injection attack detection. There's lives. There's all this stuff. Do you ever feel that it's a constant snowballing of sort of like fraud prevention efforts that you have to incorporate in order to stay competitive?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the way that we approach this is, what we have built are a assortment of models, including like the prime deepfake detection world model that we've released, that needs to really understand where it's living and what environment it's living in, right? So And an important part of that right now is helping organizations and enterprises and how government agencies really understand like what attack vector is being threatened right now, right? Is it, and these are simple things like your authentication and sign-up flow is now vulnerable to these Gen AI attacks. It's like this real-time communications that is like super vulnerable to deepfake attacks. So I think it's extremely challenging, right? And but what I would argue, and from our experience, I think building a general purpose or even like a model that has high efficacy against these different types of fraud and these different vectors, all the way from like authentication, ID verification to real-time communications, et cetera, to build something that actually holds up needs to do far more than just detect whether it's AI or not. It needs to understand like, oh, well, what if someone distorts the audio stream? What if someone adds like a filter to the image or, skews the video or compresses the video? Like, does it still hold up? So it's actually really important to understand like the environment in which these models are living in. And this actually brings us to like a product that we've basically put the world model in, and we think the world model lives best in this product. So as of today, we also announced that we have this product called Agents, which is a very generic name, but the idea behind Agents is that it is given all of our models, but what it tries to do is understand like, where is it running? So is this running inside of like some sort of network, or is it running inside of some sort of intrusion prevention system, or is it running inside of ID verification, or is it running inside the telecommunications like network layer? And this agent basically is observing and building up memory of like the tools around it, the models around it, and then trying to figure out like where it can be positioned best and like how it needs to be calibrated to perform in that area. And this is super important because right now, a lot of the other deepfake detection solutions are like a single API call. They're like, you give it an input and you get an output back. And from our perspective, that's not going to work that well. It's like, if you bundle this and then just like the generative models are learning by themselves recursively, the detection model also needs to live in its environment and learn recursively about the types of attacks it sees. And so it's like we're following a lot of like the similar patterns that we see in the generative world, but this is kind of what it takes today to actually, I think build modern cybersecurity infrastructure. It's that kind of, I think we're well past like you do it once and you have one authentication system and you set and forget, to like this thing is like a living, breathing, self-improving piece of software. So that's the approach that we're taking with like kind of wrapping around our models into this like agent infrastructure itself.
Awesome. Well, with that, I'll say congratulations on the product launches. It seems like a big moment for Resemble. I have one more question. I always like to finish with something a little different. And are you a sports fan at all, Zohaib?
I am, yeah.
So I have to pose a very important question to you then, as a Toronto man, that maybe your world model can answer for me. Is Kawhi Leonard going to play for the Toronto Raptors this coming NBA season?
I wish the dream of world models is to actually predict the future. That's just the first thing I thought about too. When world models first came out, I'm like, oh, we're creating simulations. I was actually, I remember exactly that Kawhi Leonard shot that was hit off the rim like 5 or 6 times before it went in. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes, he is, because I'm very hopeful that he can recreate that magic one more time. But we will find out. There's some things that I think are left better to our imagination than to reality. Than it would ruin the fun if the model could predict that.
Yeah. The enigma of Kawhi Leonard is beyond even the reach of AI, I suppose.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Zohaib. I really appreciate you coming on and spending the time with us today. It's been great to get your insights and to learn more about Resemble.ai. And hopefully we'll talk again sometime about what's next for deepfake detection. Thanks to Jesus Aragon and Zohaib Ahmed for joining us today. And thanks to you for listening. Deepfakes are now a reality. Detection is essential. but not always easy to find. Increasingly, but a complete security strategy that can defend on multiple. But a complete security strategy that can defend on multiple fronts. Buyers looking for guidance on how to start with deepfake detection or how to level up should head to biometricupdate.com to download the Deepfake Fraud Detection Market 20 Insights, Market Forecasts. It's packed with insights, market forecasts, vendor profiles, and Thanks again for listening. See you next time on the Biometric Update podcast.